Parents and young athletes can be confused and frustrated by too many options, too much advice, and too high a cost when it comes to athletic development. The Prospect Blueprint podcast is designed to help athletes get on the right course and make better informed decisions about their amateur career based on those who've already had that success. Everyone has a different path, but the blueprint essentially remains the same. Welcome to the Prospect Blueprint podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Kleinman. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us on the Prospect Blueprint. I'm Kelly Kleinman. Well, today we have with us a fella who, in his senior year at Simi Valley High School, went 14-1 with an earned run average of .72. He had 180 strikeouts in 100 innings. He went on to play Major League Baseball, had a sweet 11-year career from 1990 to 2001. Finished his playing career with a 42-25 record, a 3.44 ERA, 358 strikeouts and 481 and two-thirds innings pitched, and he only gave up one home run every 14.5 innings. Of course, that was pre-launch angle, right? Anyway, to make matters even more interesting, he's also the front man for a punk rock band called Pulley. He's toured on 3 different continents. He's been active in punk rock since the 80s, and he was the owner of the Skateboarding Hall of Fame, also known as the Skate Lab in Simi Valley. It doesn't stop there. He's the pitching coach for Team USA and has been a pitching coach for the Indians, Dodgers, and most recently the Anaheim Angels, or the Angels of Los Angeles, whatever we want to call them. I call them the California Angels because I'm an old guy. And he has embraced the new metrics-based system of performance analysis for pitchers. We're going to get into that here in a minute. Scott Radinsky has also volunteered his time with our high school team at Westlake. His son, Scott Jr., is a talented and determined young player entering his senior year, and there's nobody on the planet that I know that gives back to this game, literally gives back to this game with his time and effort than Scott Radinsky, and it's an absolute honor to have him on the Prospect Blueprint. Scott Radinsky, welcome.
Thank you very much. That's quite the introduction, and I appreciate all the compliments. Thank you.
Well, the amazing thing is you're like a modern-day Buckaroo Banzai. I mean, imagine like all the dreams you could have growing up as a teenager. You know, play in a rock and roll band, own the Skateboarding Hall of Fame, play in the major leagues, coach in the major leagues. It's unbelievable. You're truly blessed. You've got a fantastic family. But Scott and I have been friends for a long time, so I'm biased, but it's true. It is all very true. So take us through your amateur career. When did you start playing? What leagues did you play in? And when did you realize that you had skills beyond that of the average kid?
Well, I think like all kids, I started at a young age, T-ball. I don't know if it was around 6 or 7. Then, it was parks and recreational league stuff where I grew up, local teams. I think it was a year or 2 of T-ball. Then we graduated on to, where we pitched. If you walked a guy, then the coach would pitch, and then just kind of kept going up the ladder. Nothing real special, just regular generic parks and recreational baseball season baseball. We were a little more well-rounded. I think, when it was baseball season, we played baseball. When it was basketball season, we played basketball. And it was just kind of, you did whatever sport was in season. And that's kind of really all that was offered to you at the time. So for me, that's where it started, at an early age, 6, 7, and just kept going all the way up until high school with pretty much everything until I singled out baseball, probably 9th grade, 10th grade, entering my high school.
When did you realize that you were slightly better than the average Joe out there on the diamond?
I never realized that, to be honest with you, especially in the amateur. Ever realized that. I always thought I had a pretty strong arm, but I wasn't an all-star. I wasn't a starting player on a team. I didn't really have a position. Being left-handed, I was, it was either first base or somewhere in the outfield or pitch, and that's kind of all you were stuck with. And I didn't stand out. I didn't have any more power than the guy next to me, or like I said, I felt like I had a good arm, but I didn't pitch a whole lot, and I didn't throw strikes, so it didn't really matter.
Yeah. Now, you played park and rec ball. Did you ever play travel ball? Was travel ball popular, or did it reach any kind of a level of interest back then? That we're talking about what the early '80s, would it be, or mid '80s?
Yeah, there was definitely kids that were going a little more full time with with an individual sport. I was always encouraged to kind of keep doing everything as long as I could. So that's kind of the way my parents directed me, which I'm kind of grateful for. I think and if you see, I think the athleticism that has been lost over the last, let's say, 10 years, where kids have just focused on one sport, has hurt a lot of players in time. And if you look at some of the kids that are being drafted now in modern day drafts in the last few years, it's a lot more athleticism. I mean, kids that, were basketball players in high school that could dunk a basketball, or just more than just a single sport. But yeah, I singled it out probably somewhere around high school, and I never really did anything more than just when the season was going on. I never, whether it was for financial reasons or just lack of interest, I never did anything extra other than what was offered, by the school.
Mm-hmm. Because I know right now costs are very almost prohibitive for a lot of people. And they really have to reach the bottom of the couch cushion to be able to send their kids to just play Little League, let alone a travel ball. Do you have any recollection what the costs were for Parks and Rec? Was it like $50 and you bought shoes and that was about it?
I want to say it was around $50-$60. That's what it was to join the league. And I think you could buy a jacket if you wanted a jacket extra. And you had your glove and you had your cleats, and that's pretty much it. It was limited expenses back then.
Now you're being extremely modest when you say that you don't believe you ever stood out, because your senior year you definitely stood out at 14-1 with an 0.72 earned run average. Do you remember who the first college was that reached out to you, and when you started getting some looks from some of the pro scouts?
Well, I mean, it really wasn't until my senior year that I started pitching. I pitched a little bit my junior year, and I guess, yes, my senior year in high school, I'm still an amateur, and I did start to recognize that I was going in a different path than maybe some of the other guys. And these are guys that were better than me growing up my whole life. And I think for everybody, it clicks at a different time. And fortunately for me, it clicked at the right time. And my senior year, I started to excel and focused on pitching only. And I put down the bat. And I just kind of took to that and put all my energy into, being on the mound. As far as colleges reaching out, I used to get these little cards in the mail. I can remember Arizona, University of Hawaii, USC, a lot of the local schools around here. I never filled them out, to be honest with you. I didn't know if I had the grades, or I didn't even have the college prep classes at the time to even get accepted into a university, let alone was the finances of it. Unless they were giving me a full scholarship, wasn't going to happen, So I was about halfway through my senior year, and I remember thinking, man, I might be able to make something of this. And I remember asking my high school coach, who taught like a driver's ed and a health class, if I could meet him in between classes and just talk to him. Well, he had a period, might have been fourth period or something, where he didn't have a class. So he wrote me a note, and I had the whole fourth period. I sat in his classroom with him, and I asked him straight up, like, can I play baseball in college? And he kind of smiled and he said, well, yes, you can definitely play baseball in college. Where you want to go and where you set your sights is we got to figure that out. And he had my transcripts in front of him and knew what my limitations were going to be. We talked about some powerhouse JC colleges in Southern California that were, big baseball schools. Mm. And he mentioned to me that he caught wind that he thought I might have a chance to get drafted. After he said, by the time he got the word drafted out, I don't think I ever thought about college again the rest of my life. And from that point on, I just thought, well, I'm going to do whatever it takes to be a professional baseball player. Forget college. Yeah. And against the wishes of my mom, that's kind of the direction I went mentally. And that's where I put myself, was I was determined at that point to be a professional baseball player. And then I just sat around and waited till June 7th, whenever the draft was.
Take us back to June 7th.
Yeah, well, the high school season was finished. The high school seasons finish a little early. My team we were lucky enough to get all the way to the semifinals. The game before Dodger Stadium, we got beat by a team. I don't know what month, must have been sometime in May. So there was another 3 weeks before the draft, and I started getting a lot of phone calls from a lot of scouts asking me what it would take to sign, did I have interest in signing, that whole game.
Sure. No, I don't, but I hope to.
Yeah. So there was an entity back then called the Major League Scouting Bureau, and what they did was the major leagues actually had these guys that were to help college and high school players. It's disbanded since then, but so they would call me and kind of instruct you in what to say to the scouts, how to talk to them, how to play the game a little bit. And so I expressed my interest in college and, to these scouts and told them I had colleges that were interested. I had interest in going to school and continuing my education and blah, blah, blah. And then I got a phone call. I went to school that day and my coach said, "Why are you here?" I said, "Well, we're at school." And I got home. It was about, 3:30 and the phone rang. I picked it up. I think we only had 2 phones, one in the kitchen, one in my mom's bedroom. And I picked it up in her bedroom. And I said, "Hello?" And a guy said, "Is this Scott Radinsky?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, this is Dwayne Schaefer from the Chicago White Sox. Congratulations. We drafted you in the 3rd round." Now, you got to remember, this is 1986. There's no internet. We didn't have ESPN on TV, at least in my household. I don't even know if it was popular then. So to me, the Chicago White Sox might have been on the North Pole. They might as well have been on the North Pole. They were so far from the Dodgers or the Angels or anything that I was aware of.
Sure.
And I remember pausing a little bit, and he says, "Well, God, don't sound so excited." I said, "Oh, no, I'm super excited. Who's on the team?" And he says, Carlton Fisk, and he starts naming all these people, and which really meant nothing to me. And we set up a time. They came to my house, him and the local area scout. This was I guess he was the West Coast supervisor. And so him and the area scout who had come to a lot of games and watched me, they showed up to the house one day and basically made me an offer and asked if I was interested in, signing a contract to go play professional baseball. And that was the tough part, was sitting in the living room and trying to play hard to get, because I had no interest in going to school. It was, what do I got to do to sign this thing and give me a ticket now? I want to be on my way.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it was an interesting process,
It's almost like you were a rube out in the sticks back in 1905, and you got a telegram. You had no idea who the team was or who was on it, whatever the deal was. But yeah, I could throw. I'll show up. Sure enough. I mean, that's a remarkable story. It's I love hearing it. I've heard it before. Yeah. I'll listen to it another 10 times. That's terrific. So then you went to where did it go from there? So hold on. Let's go back real quick. You showed up to school, and you said that your teacher said, "What are you doing here?" Did they know that you had gotten drafted?
No, they didn't know that I was drafted. Nobody knew at that point. It was just draft day, and he assumed, well, aren't you going to sit home by the phone?
Go and get home, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was just different times back then.
Yeah.
I think now they invite kids to come hang out in Connecticut in a little, makeshift studio they build as a little infield and a dugout, and all the prospective kids that are going to be drafted on the first day. And it just wasn't like that back then. It was totally different. And coming from Simi Valley, which was a small town, a suburb of LA, it wasn't, baseball was different. It's come a long way in the last 30 years.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the things that I know a lot of our audience is going to be interested in regarding arm care. There's a lot of pitchers out there, a lot of aspiring pitchers, and they probably, want to know what kind of arm care they should be considering. And of course, we call it prehabbing. But what kind of arm care did you practice back then, or was your arm just so fresh that you didn't have to? And then, did you ever experience any arm pain or issues throughout your younger days of your career, or as you moved on in your career? And how did you treat it?
Well, I was really lucky. My junior year of high school, when I made the varsity team, a former player from our school had tooled around in the minor leagues in A-ball with the Brewers. And he had got released that spring and came back to the high school and asked our coach if he could help him out. So we had basically a professional guy who, went to our high school, went to local colleges in the Valley, and then he went on to play in the minor leagues a little bit. So he had a little bit of, and this was also still in the dinosaur days of exercise or whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. But he gave us, me and this other pitcher, he gave us some surgical tubing, and he said, tie this to your doorknob in your bedroom. And he showed us some motions to do with our arms for our shoulders, to do some wrist stuff for our forearms, which was kind of unheard of back then, at least at that level. Mm-hmm. I don't know what they were doing at the professional level. But for high school kids to be introduced, to some sort of band or tubing type work we were pretty fortunate.
Yeah.
So my junior year, like I said, I didn't pitch much. I just did that religiously. And that was what I was exposed to was early on was the tubing and the bands. And then later to find out as I got into professional baseball, it was pretty common. Everybody was distributed a different colored band and shown a certain type of exercises. And that's what we did. And I think the most important thing is having a routine and being consistent with it. I don't think there's a magical wand that says this one's better than another. Everybody's different. Mm-hmm. Everybody likes a different pair of shoes, different pair of pants. We all like different gloves, so on and so on. But when you find through process of elimination the routine and the movements that work for your arm and make you feel good, you stick with them. And my suggestion is you don't try to fix what's not broke. Mm-hmm. And you want to evolve and you want to make adjustments as you go and continue to try to get better as your body allows you to, maturity-wise and strength-wise, especially as a younger kid. But from what I've seen, just in my little bit of exposure to, I don't want to call it youth, but let's say 17 and younger, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of kids that are doing a lot, and stuff they see on the internet, on YouTube, and they're seeing grown men do these weighted ball exercises or grown men doing certain exercises, and kids want to do it. And when you're 15, you're not going to throw 95. And when you stress your joints, and I'm getting off topic a little bit here, but
no, you're on topic. You're dead on.
You start stressing your joints because we all want now. Everybody wants now. I want to hit homers now. I want to throw 100 now. And the fact of the matter is the human body just doesn't allow you to do that. We all have our own path and maturity rate when we hit our man strength, I call it. Mm-hmm. And for me personally, I thought I was strong in high school, and it really wasn't until I was about 21 years old when I really became strong. And that's right around 21, 22 is when I was starting to be able to do certain things physically that I couldn't have done before. Even if I tried, I wouldn't have done them properly. My technique would have been off, and I would have injured myself. I did have an injury. I had a labrum tear early on, really my first year in professional baseball. I don't want to say it was due to overuse or misusage. I just pitched a lot in high school, and there was no pitch counts. And I threw complete games. Every time I went out there and threw a complete game, and I'd go 3-2 on every batter, and I'd either walk them or strike them out. And so there was a lot of volume put on my arm. And then I went into professional base. I graduated on a Friday. The next day, on Saturday, I flew to Florida to join my rookie ball team. And then it was every day after that. I pitched on a 5-day rotation, which I was never accustomed to, and threw a bullpen in between, and then continued to play catch every single day, along with going through the drills and the pickoffs and the ground balls and throw to second, and just so much volume my body wasn't used to. And ultimately, I was really lucky. I had a torn labrum, but it was fixable, and I think my process back then was a little more time consuming than it would be nowadays. They just tack down a slap tear, and you're back on your feet within 3 to 5 months. Mine was about a year process, but during that rehab process is when it really clicked for me. And that's when I established my routine. And unfortunately, it takes injury a lot of time for a lot of guys to figure that out. And to figure out that they need to do something, they need to put back into the tank. And and I learned about recovery. And when you're young, you don't think about recovery. And recovery is probably, if not as important or more important than the actual work you're putting in, because your body needs time to repair itself and heal. And it's amazing what can happen in a 48-hour period. You know, the what can regenerate itself, and all the hard work you put in, and then and how you can bounce back when you continue to grind on a daily basis, which is what I did at that early age, and my body wasn't physically prepared for it. I ultimately broke down. But like I said, you know, one of the best things that came out of that was a work ethic and a routine and an understanding of who I was and what I was capable of doing, and not trying to do something that I couldn't.
Sure. And that makes all the sense in the world when you have downtime to use it to grow, to get better at something, and strengthen some weaknesses if possible. We've had to do that with COVID. All these ball players are sitting around. A lot of us can't get out on the field, and they're stuck at home or trying to do some work at the park or whatever they can do to throw and sort of reproduce game type activities, but it's difficult. So I feel a little bit privileged on some level that my boys who are getting ready to go to school have been able to rest their arm a little bit and work in some other exercises to strengthen other areas that I thought they needed some improvement on. I think it's utilizing that off time makes all the sense in the world. Now, you've had so much exposure to so many different pitchers. You've worked on all levels of the minor leagues and, of course, the majors. What are some of the most common issues you see with arms? And then what are pitchers doing wrong, and what are some of them doing right?
Well, I mean, at the professional level, I think, you know, once you get into that everyday grind of throwing for 8 straight months, and there's no days off, and when they are, you're usually traveling. In the minor leagues, there's, I don't know, day off once a month maybe. I'd say some of the things that most commonly pitchers are doing right is they're being instructed properly. You know, in the organizations I've been in, the strength and conditioning guys are great at every level. The communication is, you know, it's fluid throughout the organization. So whatever they're doing at the major league level, they're doing at the rookie ball level. So as you're working your way through the ladder, there's consistency. There's no freelancing. And, you know, it's individualized per pitcher. So it's not just generic cookie cutter, everybody's doing the same thing, but there are options to choose from. And like I said, they'll individualize a program for you. But I think when it becomes your job, you'll see a lot of guys take it differently, because now it's my job. I'm not just going through the motions. And I work with some high school kids here 3 days a week for the last 3 months. And yeah, they're doing something and it's better than nothing, but there's a big difference between going to the ballpark and watching a professional, you know, in A ball, and then the next level of double A, the maturity, triple A, and then you get to the big leagues, and it's part of their routine. Like I mentioned earlier, the routine, the consistent routine is what they're doing right. They don't come to the park on a given day and just kind of throw things up in the air and say, what am I going to do today? They've got a plan. And, you know, a starting pitcher, he's on that 5-day routine. He's got his 5-day workload. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's eating. The reliever tends to find himself, and once they settle in and they understand what kind of volume they can, you know, play and catch at 4 o'clock, how many breaking balls can I spin during my flat ground? You know, I got 3-4 hours before the game starts. I'm going to recover. I'm going to be fine. Once they have that peace of mind and they know that, you know, they can throw on a regular basis, they don't have to wait on their weight training. A lot of guys early on will, I might pitch tomorrow. I haven't pitched in 2 days. It doesn't affect you. You know, once you get into that routine, that consistent routine, that's what pitchers are doing right. What they're doing wrong are the ones that usually defy that. And like I touched on a little bit there, you know, as a reliever, if I hadn't pitched in 3 days, for me just to tell the strength coach, I'm not going to do anything, I'm going to wait until I pitch. Well, that's wrong. That's now I have no routine. Now I'm just sitting and waiting to pitch, and to me, it's just the consistency. That's the most important thing, is having a consistent plan, and that's a term you're going to hear a lot in professional baseball, is, you know, that consistent plan. What's your plan? Hitters, they go in the cage. What's your routine? What is it? Do you just come in here and freelance, or do you have a routine? I work on hitting the ball the other way, or, whatever it is. Pitcher gets on the mound. What's your routine? Do you just keep sitting and throwing that breaking ball until you get it right, or do you have a routine? And you have to be very meticulous and consistent with that, and never hit the panic button, or try to get that want all today, and understand the process, that it is a process, and there is no magic wand. There's no snap of the finger that says it's going to happen now. We don't know when that is going to happen. And if you stick with the consistency over time, the talent separates, and
No, I understand. One thing I also want to tell the audience about you is, and I had alluded to earlier, that you give back. My one son, Cato, they asked him to pitch at the JOs, and they felt that at 7 o'clock in the morning, if anybody would be ready to go, it would be him. He ended up throwing 53 pitches, something like 48 strikes, and there were 8 errors behind him, and he was done. His arm was iced from then on, and we did the MRI, we did the x-rays, we did the whole shooting match. It was his elbow, and we thought, son of a gun, this was a bad decision. And I did not chime in with the coach because I wasn't aware of the sheer volume of pitches. But Scott put us on a plan. He spoke to us. I'm speaking as if you're not in the room. But he spoke with us. He stayed with it. He texted. He got us involved in a program with bands and rehab. And he would text regularly to make sure that Cato was all well and good and that he was feeling better. It was literally the best experience that we've ever had with a coach in our 12 years of playing baseball. And I really appreciate that, Scott. That's something we'll never forget. That was huge for them. Turns out we were very lucky that he didn't have any damage, and that of all the stuff that we were doing, it simply took going to a deep massage technician, a masseuse, a therapist, who felt it in the shoulder. See, it's so complex. An arm injury is so complex. He felt it in the shoulder. Literally after one session, Cato said, "Wow, I can't believe this, but it feels like my arm is completely empty. I don't feel any pain anymore." And he went back another time, and then he came back and he started on a plan that Scott Radinsky suggested he start on and stay with a plan. And he stayed with it, and now he's throwing the ball a good 90 miles across the diamond, which is really exceptional. And we basically give you the attribution for that, because it was you who brought it to us. Now let's share that information with some other folks. How do you suggest that young pitchers strengthen their arms? What are some of the exercises? What kind of tools can you provide them to help them get stronger and avoid injury?
Well, I think depending on your age,
Yeah.
And where you're at, I think as you get into your teens, your body's starting to develop a little more. You can maybe do a little more, but I certainly think the band work is pretty harmless for a young kid, as long as you're doing the movements proper. And you can get on the internet now on YouTube, and you can follow a ton of people. But you have to remember, if I'm 16 years old, I can't try to emulate a 25-year-old man and what he's doing. It's not a comparison. So I've got to try to dig deep, and it's all push the button, and the kids are great at this, finding out, what can I do, and what are suggestive, opinions and thoughts towards what I'm going to do work-wise. Like I said, the bands, you're pretty harmless. You're not looking at like damaging a lot of structural stuff inside your arm. Proper throwing mechanics and proper volume. Videotaping yourself and watching your throw, and being a good self-evaluator and being able to analyze what you do. And going back again, not trying to emulate somebody. We are all different. I can't throw the same as Kershaw. You can't bat the same as Willie Mays. We're all different, and we all have to find out who we are. And that's the most important thing, is I think the earlier of an age you can understand what type of person you are, what type of pitcher you are, the quicker you're going to figure out what your plan is going to be. I would say monitoring and having a regimented throwing program. If you're going to go out and pitch once a week, you better be playing catch a couple of other times a week, and they're keeping the wheels greased. If you're just going to go out and throw once a week, or you're going to pitch off the mound for the first time in 3 months and blow it out, that's a dumb move. I mean, you're asking yourself to have some sort of something bad's going to happen. When you mentioned Cato and his recovery, a lot of patience involved, a lot of patience, and ramping up to get ready to throw on a mound. It doesn't happen in a week. I think that's where a lot of the younger youth leagues or even high school, the kid's been throwing 2 weeks, he's good to go pitch. It doesn't work that way. I mean, there's a reason why this year in baseball, if you look at this so-called major league season, there is so many arm injuries because they didn't have a proper, yes, guys were throwing during the downtime between the 2 spring trainings, but it wasn't the same. And now, some big name arms are going down and they're having surgery because of this. And there's a reason why, every year, first of the year rolls around, you start kind of getting yourself ready. You go to spring training, which seems like a marathon, but there's a reason why. And it's all about injury prevention and trying to avoid. So the process to get there is just as important as when you do get there, and then monitoring the volume. So kids, yeah, we're elastic, we're 15, 16 years old, 13 years old, my arm's rubber, I can go throw all day long, but you really can't. And somebody smart enough probably has to be making decisions for us at that age, and not allowing the kid to have the freedom to, just kind of go, aprons loose and just doing whatever they want to do. There's got to be some structure. And I think you got to be a kid. You have to throw. You have to allow yourself just to be able to do it. But there's got to be some sort of, back to the same word, there's got to be some sort of plan. And, anything's better than nothing at that age. So anything you can do, I always think of your arm as like an ATM machine. And you keep depositing out of that machine at some point, or, you keep withdrawing. At some point, you got to make a deposit. So every time I would wrap that surgical tubing around my doorknob and I would do my shoulder exercises or my elbow exercises, I thought, I'm putting back in. I'm allowed to put out some throws now. And as long as you're doing something and being smart, I think it's common sense. And like I said, a lot of times, unfortunately, the younger kids, they don't have common sense. They don't know any better. They want to throw until they feel like they got it right. And then the next day they're sore as hell and they can't lift their arm. And that's where the injury comes, because now you're with fatigue, like you were talking about the kinetic chain there. It's the shoulder, and the elbow. It all goes from the ankle, knee, hip, it all works its way up and from the bottom. And when one little part's out of a line, it affects something else. And sooner or later, you're gonna blow a gasket in a different part of your engine.
Hey, are you an advocate of long toss? I know some folks believe in it, and I know, Trevor Bauer claims that it's his holy grail. What's your take on it?
Depends on the individual.
Yeah.
I think for some guys it's really good. I think for an outfielder, a catcher, and to some pitchers to an extent, I think you need to lengthen that a little bit. You need to stretch out your arm. I don't know how important it is for a second baseman flipping the ball over to first, or a first baseman. I would assume like a third baseman and a shortstop need to have a little bit of length, with something on it. I do believe that there's a lot of validity in long toss and strengthening your arm properly. I don't like the big arc. I think you look at your position and you specialize in your skill set. I'm a catcher. The farthest throw I have to make is 120 feet to second base. Well, maybe 130 feet's a catcher's long toss. Same goes for a pitcher, but my volume and my time out there on the mound, I want to build strength. I want to build endurance. I want to have some lung capacity, and I want to have the elasticity in my arm to be able to repeat over and over and over 100 times a day, which is an average pitch count. So depending on the guy and depending on the long toss program, I think the distance is going to be different for each guy in each position. But I do believe in lengthening out your arm to an extent, yes.
Let's take it back a few decades. Why do you suspect that there are so few arm injuries back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, considering the volume of innings that those starters competed in? Could it be weight training, or could it be that they didn't throw year-round because there weren't year-round leagues at the time?
Well, yeah, they definitely didn't throw year-round. They had the recovery period. They had the rest. Although, the Satchel Pages were throwing down in the winter leagues and everything else. They threw for 20-some-odd straight years. There's a lot of luck and a lot of genetics involved in guys that have those type of careers that can throw like that. Weight training, when I came up, I believe my team was one of the first teams in professional baseball to have a strength and conditioning coach. So I bought in at an early age. When I had my surgery earlier on, I bought in at the lower levels in the A-ball, and I continued to do that throughout my career. These med ball tosses, we had these body blades, we had all kinds of – the older guys laughed at me. They really laughed at me like, what are you doing, kid? You're going to break down. And I didn't know any different. I knew that this is what helped me get to where I'm at, and I'm going to continue to do it and stay here. And they just never did it. Those guys, they smoked cigarettes, they drank beer, they played catch. That's what they did. And it worked for them. Some of those guys had, 10, 12, 15-year careers. A lot of luck. There really is a lot of luck. And a guy's delivery, I don't think now – I don't know how many innings guys logged in the minor leagues back then, but I'm sure they logged enough to have proper mechanics. Deliveries were stressed. You're going to throw the ball proper. And I think now we're searching for velocity. And if you got a live arm, you fly through the ranks. You don't know how to field your position. You don't know how to control the running game, but you're in the big leagues. And all you're expected to do is throw the hell out of the ball as hard as you can. And if you walk 3 guys, oh well, but you touch 99. That's the sexy part of that. That's what's attractive. And so you're getting these guys that just don't have proper deliveries. They don't throw properly. They're putting their body in harm's way, or their arm in harm's way with with the position of their body. And and weight training, like I said, I'm a believer in it to an extent, but I know certain organizations have different philosophies, and some guys do different things, and that has to put extra stress on your joints. It just has to. And these guys are strong now. They're really strong with all these shakes and mixes and protein this and everything they do and all this recovery stuff. And, they beat themselves up pretty hard. And your body can only take so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. So as an extremely accomplished pitcher and coach, what qualities do you look for? You mentioned high heat, but I know that you look for more than that. What are the qualities? What's the mental makeup that you're looking for? What kind of mental makeup makes a great pitcher? And do some pitchers just have a sixth sense when it comes to throwing? They know when to throw it and where and how to approach a batter. I think of Greg Maddux and some of these guys who didn't really throw that hard, but son of a gun, they got a lot of guys out.
Yeah. For me, more than the physical tools was always above the shoulders. I felt like, at least in professional baseball, the average right-hander was going to throw 92 with a slider. We had, 8 of them on a 12-man staff. But the separator was above the shoulders, the guy that there was an ingredient inside his belly that you couldn't teach, which was determination. And then above the shoulders, there was a calmness of a guy who just never got caught up in the awe of everything. Never knew there was a crowd. Never concerned himself with watching video or asking how hard he threw. Or, there's a lot of guys that we call them, neck jerkers. They throw a pitch and they look back at the radar gun on the scoreboard because they want to see how hard that pitch was. I can guarantee you, Greg Maddux never looked back. And if anything, he probably asked, "Turn it off when I'm on the mound." And as far as the sixth sense, I don't know if it's you'll hear everybody talk about keeping it simple and just dumbing it down, keeping it simple. because especially in today's world with all the technology and all the instant feedback we have, it can really cloud a lot of guys' brains. There are some guys that can absorb that and handle it. But I mean, a baseball player is a baseball player. And I'd say 99% of the guys that are out there probably don't need half that information, shouldn't have it, because they just can't digest it mentally. Because, like I said, above the shoulders is the separator. And to be able to control your heartbeat and keep that calm, collective, no panic mode, and just have the confidence in what you have and know who you are. Greg Maddux knew he wasn't going to throw 98, so he never tried. He was going to make a consistent pitch, and he wasn't going to miss. And that's how he got people out. He could tell you what was coming. I mean, you see Greinke on TV now telling guys slider or fastball. They don't care. I've made hand motions before letting people know what was coming. It's not about that. It's making your pitch, because the hardest thing in sports to do is hit a baseball. I don't care if you know what's coming. If I make my pitch, I'm going to feel pretty good about it. I got a pretty good chance that you're going to walk back to the dugout, and then if you're a Hall of Fame All-Star, only 3 out of 10 times are you going to be on first base. So I don't forget those odds. And that's where you don't panic. That's where the consistency comes in. Just make my pitch. It's all I can control. It's like hitting. You put a good swing on the ball. It's all you can control. If you put a good swing on the ball and you get good wood on the ball, it's out of your hands after that. You just run like hell to first base. If a guy makes a great play, whatever, you got to tip your hat. But if you consistently keep putting a good swing on the ball, those balls are going to start falling in here and there. You're going to be a 300 hitter, 280 hitter, same as a pitcher. You make your pitch. I as a pitching coach, I sat on the bench a lot, well, the whole game. And a catcher would usually sit down next to me, and I couldn't tell you how many times a catcher would come, and we'd both be staring at the field, while our team's batting, the other team's out there, and maybe 1 out, 2 outs goes by, and the catcher wouldn't even look at me, but he'd say, "God, I should have called a curveball right there." And I'd look at him, I'd say, "Well, you reach for that fastball all the way over here. He missed by 13 inches, and you're going to second guess that? Make a pitch and then come in and second guess it." And a lot of times, 99% of the time, it's on the pitcher. Mm-hmm. I don't like second guessing catchers. I'd rather I always look back. I go to the video room right away and say, where was that pitch? And if you miss by an inch, you get hit, and it's a game of inches. And so for me, that's kind of more I don't know what the right word is. That's kind of more what you're looking for is making the pitch, mm-hmm, rather than 98 velocity is great, and great breaking ball is great, and good spin is great. And when you have all that, you have special guys. And there's just not a whole lot of Bob Gibsons and Nolan Ryans they don't grow on trees. And unfortunately, we don't have the time to develop those guys anymore because they're shot through the system so fast. Yeah. And it does the pitcher a disservice, really, because when he gets to the big leagues, like I said, you're embarrassed because you can't even control the running game, and they're just stealing all over on you. And it's the organization's fault for not having the time. It's the system's fault for the way the game's made up now, yeah, to where guys are just fast tracked and they lose that quality. Where, like I said, you look at guys in the minor leagues and they probably logged 500-600 innings pitching under the belt before they made it to the big leagues.
Yeah. Now you use the new school metrics-based system of performance analysis. This is something that a lot of people haven't adapted to, especially guys who played for a long time and come from a slightly older school. What do you see looking at the numbers that you can't see just by observation, and why are these new metric systems better than the traditional set of performance metrics?
Well, some are good, some are bad. I've definitely bought into science, and I enjoy looking at the plane break on a ball through TrackMan or through certain Rapsodo. Some of these I don't know, machines. I don't know what you call them, but some of the technology that's used, and it definitely provides feedback. I mean, I couldn't tell you how many times I would sit in the dugout and watch a pitcher, and what I see with my eye can just be confirmed now, and not just through video, but through science. Like that ball really did this, or that ball really did that. It helps you really sometimes find a guy's strength. Some guy's out there throwing two-seam fastballs, and he thinks it's a great pitch when in reality it's getting clobbered, and it's four-seam. So you have this information to approach a pitcher with, and sit down and maybe retool the arsenal and reprioritize how you're going to. I think it's gotten a lot of guys in trouble because if you're not a strikeout pitcher, you can't strike a guy out on an 0-0 count. But you'll see a lot of guys fall behind 1-0 because science tells us that 70% of the time you throw your breaking ball, you're going to get a swing and miss, or it's going to be a miscued swing, soft hit somewhere. Well, now you're asking a guy who might not be a breaking ball pitcher to spin a breaking ball 0-0 and fall behind. Where in the past, guys would pitch to contact until you got two strikes, and if you got to two strikes and you had an out pitch, you can go ahead and wipe them out. But you can't strike a guy out until you get there. So, like I said, sometimes there's good and bad with the science. Exit velocity is a great one, for a pitcher, especially when you're trying to. We have guys that just absolutely deal in the minor leagues, and there's just something about him that it's not. Yeah, he might have a 10-2 record at the All-Star break, and he's carving up the Midwest League, but that the stuff's not going to play out. And someone asks why, and you say, well, they're averaging 91 miles an hour off the bat. That's the average exit velocity. And then there's this other guy who might be getting clobbered a little bit because he's putting more balls in play, and it's 86 miles an hour off the bat. But then this defense is so horrible that we're putting out there. It works itself out, and the computer says, well, this guy pitching with a good defense and this and that, this is what his. And sure in hell, as you move a guy up, those are how the numbers play out. And I'm not saying that the computer's right all the time, but there's some pretty interesting information that can be used on both sides of the ball to help evaluate. And that's really what it is. It's an evaluation tool. It's not a an end all type cure. It's just it's a tool to help evaluate.
You sort of already answered this question. I've got two more. We're basically in the bottom of the eighth, and we're the home team, and we're down by one on this one, only because we are going to go.
Sorry, I've been calling timeout a lot and getting long-winded, but
no, it's okay. And this was me when I played. I was a stat hound, and my kids are hyper aware of their statistics. That's the one thing I wish I could deprogram from them. But is virtually every team buying into this new kind of numbers game, and can this have a negative impact on players who are hyper aware of their stats, and even the most seemingly absurd measurement can have an impact on contract negotiations down the line?
Yeah, as a player and a coach, I think one of the worst things we can do as a player is be aware of our numbers, be conscious of what we're doing. I just think that's one thing you don't need to think about. Oh, I'm hitting this. Now my batting, you're walking back to the dugout. Oh, now I'm batting under 300. It's the worst thing in the world, or I just gave up a run and now my ERA is over 4. It's when all possible. I used to go. My approach to the season was, like you see the horses on the track with those blinders. I would just kind of go down the lane until October, and I swear when I came in a game, I never paid attention to the scoreboard. I didn't want to see my numbers. I never looked at a box score. That's what worked for me. Some guys, I played with Frank Thomas, and what made him tick was coming to the ballpark the next day and walking around with the newspaper, and telling everybody, making it clear that everybody in the clubhouse knew that Frank was batting 320 and not 330, and he was going to get a couple of knocks, and that was his style. Yeah. I've seen more recently in the minor leagues. I've seen with some of the new stuff. I've seen some, mostly with pitchers. Even with players. When they look at their walk ratio or their how they take pitches. Pitchers being conscious of the exit velocity and why is this guy moving up? I throw harder. I have a better record. Why is he going to Double-A and I'm still an A-ball? Well, as I mentioned. They're the ball's coming off the bat at 84 miles an hour on this guy, and they're hitting it, 89 off you. And we feel that his stuff's going to play out better at the higher levels. So those are evaluating tools. So kids start becoming more conscious of that. Well, why is this guy moving up? Well, he's hitting the ball 102 miles an hour off the bat. So now kids are swinging out of their shoes, and it's their 0-2 before you know it. We're 2 swing and misses because you can say launch angle. I think guys are trying. Ted Williams was trying to hit the ball over the fence every swing. Launch angle is just a new term, or new word being used, but it's not. It's certainly not a new term. Everybody's always, you try to lift and separate. I don't think guys are as conscious anymore of the pride in not striking out, or guys who want to touch velocity. They want to be the guy that threw 100. They want that. It looks sexy, makes them feel good. So those numbers sometimes can affect really the process of the development, which is much needed, which is becoming a well-rounded player to get better, so that when you do get the opportunity, you've built that foundation of consistency and you've got that plan, and you're not going to be searching at the highest level, which is where you don't want to be searching. And a lot of guys, like I said, get fast-tracked. They get up there real quick, and now they don't know what to do. They're like deer in the headlights because they've never had to deal with this before. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, they never had the opportunity to fail, to be consistent at failing, and then stick with their plan without making mass overhauled adjustments, with just slight adjustments from who they are to get back to what they were. And you see it all the time. I mean, you see it all the time, especially the transition from AAA to the big leagues. Guys think they got to be completely different. And in reality, it's the same game. You're going to get hit. You're going to back up third base. You're going to get hit. You're going to give up runs. It's just the way it is. So learn how to deal with it. And obviously you don't accept it, but you learn how to deal with it, and you move on, and you start understanding those odds I was mentioning earlier, and you never hit that panic button. But not a lot of guys can process that, and that ends up being the separator. And I know I'm kind of getting off track from the metric comment, but
no, you're on it.
It always keeps going back to the same circle of, it's what's right here. Yeah. That's the separator. That's the difference maker. And everybody wants to try, but do you try too hard? Do you try too much? At some point, you got to relax and sit back and say, well, it's just a game. I'm good at this. Trust yourself, and you play it, and you let your natural abilities take over. But the pressing side of it, the guys that press and the guys that it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. It looks great in the weight room and it looks great on the field, but it just, over the long course of a career, it just doesn't work. Yeah. So you try to defuse that as early as you can in their careers.
Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. Scott, I want to thank you for joining us here today on our podcast, The Prospect Blueprint. I think that you've been very helpful. I think there's going to be a lot of benefit that comes out of this interview. A lot of people are trying to find a way of maximizing and optimizing their performance and staying healthy, which is the most important thing, not just physically, but mentally, not getting caught up in the minutiae of the game, such as statistics or being able to throw real far or hit real far. It just comes with practice and patience. So I appreciate all those good points and look forward to seeing you soon. And have a great rest of your summer, and take care.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. Good luck to you guys and the boys going off to school.
Thank you very much. Well, you heard it. That's Scott Radinsky. You are listening to the Prospect Blueprint podcast. Like, share, comment, and definitely, absolutely 100% subscribe. I thank you all, and have a great day.